Rain hammered the glass walls of Orion Dynamics headquarters in Seattle as Jason Miller stared at a wall of blinking red alerts that threatened to erase $100 million before sunrise. His phone vibrating in his pocket with a reminder that his son Noah was waiting at home for a bedtime call he might not make. The numbers blurred as exhaustion pressed against his skull, and somewhere deep inside he wondered how many more nights a single father could sacrifice before something finally broke. If you were standing in his place, soaked in pressure and fear, would you choose your child's quiet voice or the company that barely knew your name? And what would it cost you either way? Jason had not always been the man people ignored in elevators. Years earlier, he had been a rising engineer with bright ideas and a warm marriage. Until a sudden illness took Rebecca and left him with a grieving 6-year-old who clung to him like a lifeline. The hospital bills stacked higher than his pride, and Orion Dynamics became less of a dream job and more of a desperate necessity. He worked double shifts, skipping lunches and sleeping in his car some nights, while coworkers like Thomas and Brian joked about promotions he never chased because daycare closed before meetings ended. The office hummed with ambition and quiet cruelty, and Jason learned to keep his head down, hiding the tired tremble in his hands and the loneliness that crept in whenever he watched other parents pick up their children together at school events he rarely attended. The crisis erupted on a gray Monday when a massive software malfunction threatened Orion's newest satellite network, a project the CEO Marcus Reed had publicly promised would transform communications across rural America. Investors panicked, executives whispered blame, and entire teams circled the problem for hours without progress. Jason sat silently in the corner conference room, listening to people with expensive suits argue over patches that made the damage worse. He recognized a flaw buried deep in the code. Something small and human that reminded him of mistakes he had once made while learning to rebuild his life after loss. His chest tightened as he realized the solution forming in his mind could stop the hemorrhage in minutes. But speaking up meant stepping into a spotlight he had avoided for years, risking ridicule from colleagues who barely remembered his name. As the countdown ticked closer to disaster, Jason walked toward the central console, hands shaking not from fear of failure but from memories of every time he had been dismissed as invisible. The room fell silent as he requested access and rewrote a core algorithm with focused urgency, piecing together a fix that merged experience with quiet resilience. Screens shifted from red to green one by one, like dawn breaking through storm clouds, and a stunned hush replaced the earlier chaos. In less than 10 minutes, the bleeding stopped, the company's losses frozen in place rather than spiraling into ruin. Jason felt no triumph, only a strange emptiness mixed with relief, thinking about how Noah would react if he could see his father finally stand tall for something beyond survival. Marcus Reed, the powerful CEO known for sharp suits and sharper words, watched the transformation with a pale, frozen expression that confused everyone around him. He did not clap or smile, and whispers rippled through the room as executives looked between Jason and their silent leader. Rumors later spread that Marcus had personally approved the flawed strategy that caused the crisis, and seeing a quiet single dad fix it in minutes shattered the illusion of control he had carefully built. Jason stood there awkwardly, unsure whether he had saved the company or embarrassed the man who controlled his future, while flashes of his son's hopeful face reminded him that sometimes courage grows out of desperation rather than ambition. The days that followed were heavy with tension. Some co-workers praised Jason privately while others treated him like a threat, and management avoided direct acknowledgement, leaving him in a strange limbo where success felt more dangerous than failure. At home, Noah sensed the stress etched into his father's posture and asked why grown-ups made simple things so complicated. Jason struggled to explain the politics of power to a child who only understood fairness and kindness. The innocence of that perspective forced him to confront how much of himself he had buried just to survive. Nights grew quieter as he reflected on Rebecca's unwavering belief in him, realizing he had spent years shrinking instead of trusting his own strength. 1 week later, Marcus called an emergency meeting that filled the auditorium with anxious faces. Jason sat in the back, expecting reprimand or silence, until the CEO walked onto the stage with tired eyes that carried the weight of regret. Instead of delivering a speech filled with corporate jargon, Marcus revealed the truth about his own fear of failure and how he had frozen not out of arrogance but because Jason's courage exposed his own blindness. The admission stunned everyone, and a new atmosphere slowly formed as he publicly credited Jason for saving the company and announced sweeping changes that prioritized collaboration over ego. In that moment, Jason felt the invisible chains around his confidence loosen, realizing that even those who seemed powerful carried hidden wounds. As Orion Dynamics began rebuilding its culture, Jason was offered a leadership role that allowed flexible hours so he could be present for Noah's growing life. The promotion did not erase the years of hardship, but it brought stability and dignity that reshaped how he saw himself. He began mentoring younger employees like Olivia and Peter, sharing lessons about resilience and quiet perseverance rather than chasing recognition. Slowly, the office transformed from a place of silent competition into a community that valued empathy. And Jason found himself laughing more often, remembering that healing did not happen in dramatic moments alone, but through small, consistent acts of courage. Months later, Jason attended Noah's school science fair, standing among proud parents as his son presented a project about satellites connecting distant communities. Tears filled Jason's eyes as he realized how closely Noah had watched his journey, absorbing strength from struggles he once tried to hide. The applause in that crowded gym felt more meaningful than any corporate recognition, reminding him that success was not measured only by saved millions, but by the example he set for a child learning what resilience looked like. He understood then that the true victory was not solving a massive problem in minutes, but rediscovering the courage to live fully despite fear and loss. Before the story ends, take a quiet moment to comment with the choice you would have made if you were standing where Jason stood, torn between fear and courage. The night after the science fair, Jason sat on the porch watching the stars with Noah, feeling the deep calm that comes from surviving storms that once seemed impossible. He carried scars from grief, exhaustion, and years of invisibility, but he also carried hope that small acts of bravery could ripple outward and change lives. The memory of that frozen CEO no longer felt like a threat, but a reminder that everyone has a moment when fear stops them cold, waiting for someone else's courage to thaw it. If this story truly touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Only if you feel moved to support stories that remind us of kindness, second chances, and the quiet heroes walking beside us every day.